Welcome to This Explainer. For the longest time, studying what people ate and drank was kind of brushed off by traditional historians as just a trivial hobby. But today, we're going to see how examining the everyday things we consume, literally something as simple as your morning cup of coffee, can actually decode the complex economic and political realities of our past. It's like a giant puzzle hiding in your pantry.
So, let's kick things off with a provocative question, one that might actually change how you view your entire morning routine. What exactly can a fake cup of coffee teach us about history? When we think about historical artifacts, right, we usually picture ancient swords, peace treaties, grand architecture. We rarely picture a cup of roasted barley or chickpeas. But as we're about to explore, what happens when a society completely runs out of a basic staple like coffee tells us an immense amount about its government, its economy, and its cultural resilience.
Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with why food history matters. Then look at the link between scarcity and coffee substitutes. After that, we'll dive into two really fascinating case studies, Italy's Caffè d'Orzo and Romania's Necasol, before wrapping up with the lasting legacy of these substitutes.
All right, Section 1. Why food history matters. The macro lens.
Now, food choices are absolutely not frivolous. They are actual, tangible markers of significant historical shifts. Take a look at this idea from Sidney Mentz's groundbreaking work on the topic. It highlights a massive turning point in academia. Initially, you see, it was anthropologists who realized that the foods we crave, the foods we trade and consume, can literally reshape the globe. Think about it. A desire for something as simple as sugar or coffee drove massive colonial expansions. It established global trade routes and completely transformed entire societies. Food isn't just fuel, it's a primary driver of human history.
And according to the foundational texts of this field, there are four massive movements that really brought food studies to the academic forefront. First, feminism, which highlighted the absolutely crucial importance of domestic work and home food production. Then, environmentalism raised major alarms about the ecological costs of how we eat. Globalization forced us to look at all these complex transnational culinary connections. And finally, anti-modernism, this really powerful desire to reconnect with authentic, traditional foods as a direct pushback against our hyper-industrialized modern food systems.
Moving right along to Section 2. Scarcity and coffee substitutes, or crisis in a cup.
So, history actually forces us to challenge absolutes like the word traditional. Why? Because so many things we eat today were born entirely out of necessity. When we encounter a supposedly ancient, deeply traditional dish, it's often actually the byproduct of a very specific and sometimes incredibly brief period of economic crisis or rationing. And honestly, there is no better example of this than coffee substitutes. When war or economic collapse cuts off global trade, coffee is almost always one of the very first things to vanish. But that human ritual, the need for a hot, dark morning beverage, is so deeply ingrained that societies literally immediately invent ways to mimic it.
Which brings us to Section 3. Italy's Caffè d'Orzo, the barley surrogate.
Okay, let's travel back to World War II. Real coffee became incredibly expensive and incredibly scarce due to rationing. In response, Italians turned to roasted barley as a cheap surrogate. But here's the kicker. Instead of ditching it the second the war ended and supply chains opened back up, the culture actually adapted it. Because it's completely caffeine-free, it became the quintessential coffee for Italian children, allowing them to partake in the daily ritual with the grown-ups. And today, well, it's finding an entirely new life across borders. It's booming in places like Germany as a health-conscious, caffeine-free alternative.
What's truly remarkable here is that this caffeine-free roasted barley drink isn't treated like some second-class citizen in the Italian culinary world. Not at all. It's given the full respect of actual coffee. Picture this, the rich, earthy aroma of roasted grains filling a kitchen in the morning. Families still brew it at home using a specialized maca pot called an orziera. And you can walk into almost any cafe in Italy today and have it expertly crafted for you on a traditional commercial espresso machine. It's literally a crisis food that's successfully assimilated into everyday luxury.
Let's flip the coin now in Section 4. Romania's infamous Necasol, dictatorial austerity.
So, during the 1980s, the Romanian government implemented these extreme austerity policies. The goal was to reduce external debt. Because imports were drastically limited to save state funds, real coffee completely vanished from regular stores. You can only find it on the black market or in these exclusive hard currency luxury shops. For the everyday citizen, the state imposed a completely new, vastly inferior substitute. But this wasn't born out of global warfare. This was born out of extreme top-down domestic austerity.
And to stretch the tiny amount of actual coffee beans they did have, the state bulked the product up with a staggering 80% filler mix. Your morning coffee was actually a brew of barely 20% coffee, mixed with barley, oats, chickpeas, and chestnuts. I mean, just imagine expecting the bright, acidic lift of Arabica beans and instead getting a watery, bitter sludge that tasted vaguely of roasted lagoons and burnt animal feed. It was devoid of caffeine, it entirely lacked the taste of true coffee, and it served as a daily, bitter reminder right there in the cup of the population's grim economic reality.
But hidden in the very name of this drink is a brilliant piece of linguistic satire. The citizens didn't just quietly accept this awful mixture. No, they weaponized its title. They combined the Romanian verb for a horse's neigh, which was a direct, biting jab at the fact that they were basically being fed animal oats, with a chemical-sounding all suffix. This was openly mocking Elena Ceausescu, the dictator's wife, whose state propaganda touted as a world-renowned scientist. Honestly, it was a brilliant, quiet form of daily rebellion, served right over breakfast.
Bringing us to our final section, Section 5, the legacy of substitutes, echoes in the cup.
So both of these drinks are grain-based, caffeine-free hot beverages born from a total lack of real coffee. Yet, look at the contrast. Café d'Orzo evolved into a beloved cafe staple, while Nechisol is remembered strictly as a symbol of extreme austerity. One sits comfortably in modern cafes right alongside your cappuccinos, while the other was abandoned the absolute second the regime fell. It only survives in cultural memory as a despised symbol of some very dark times.
It's fascinating how two caffeine-free substitutes, both born out of severe economic hardship, resulted in completely different cultural legacies. Italy's orzo was born from a shared global crisis, World War II, and was purely barley, seamlessly adopting the respected espresso preparation method. Meanwhile, Romania's nechisol was this hodgepodge of animal feed forced top-down upon a really resentful public during a peacetime domestic austerity crisis. Food history shows us that it isn't just about what's physically in the cup. It is entirely about the political and social context that poured it.
Let me leave you with one final thought to ponder today. What exactly will your own pantry staples say about us 100 years from now? When future historians look back at the foods we eat today, the massive rise of plant-based meats, globalized avocados, or even hyper-processed snacks, they're not just going to see frivolous dietary preferences. They will see our economy, our environmental anxieties, and our political shifts, all perfectly preserved in the things we choose to consume. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the history sitting right there on your plate.